Hi, everyone. Happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month. My name is GINA YACONE, and I'm a senior cybersecurity consultant and a virtual chief information security officer. So I want to welcome you guys to this Hacker Halted conference. And I'm really excited to be here. I want to thank the event organizers as well as all of the sponsors. And of course, the attendees for making this event happen. Really wish that I was in Atlanta with you guys, but I'm in my home. So I would prefer that I would be in Atlanta with you guys presenting this. This is hopefully going to be a fun and interactive presentation. And without further ado, why are you here? So we are going to be talking about tabletop exercises, which is one of my favorite topics. Incident response is one of my favorite areas in cybersecurity. So why I think tabletop exercise can prepare organizations for all the creepy, sinister, spine-tingling cybersecurity threats that are out there. Okay, so here's my disclaimer. All opinions are of my own, so you could take that as it is. So I'll go into a little bit about me. So I am a senior cybersecurity consultant in a vCISO. So what does that actually mean? And like, why would you care, I guess? So for my job, what I do is I have a variety of different clients, and my goal is every month I help them improve their cybersecurity posture through a series of different events. So it may be a risk assessment one month. The next month we might be doing penetration or different types of technical testing. The month after that, maybe we're writing policies. Boring or very, very important. The next thing, it might be a cybersecurity awareness seminar. I might be looking at firewall rules. We may be doing tabletop exercises, but just it kind of run the gamut from stuff that are administrative safeguards to very technical safeguards and everything in between. My job, I love immensely because I get to work with all different stakeholders, from the C-level all the way to the boots on the ground technical staff that is keeping our businesses safe and secure. So I was not always in cybersecurity. So I was and currently am a private investigator. I've been a private investigator since 2006. I started working in private investigation in 2003. So I did criminal defense for 14 years at a law firm, and I factually worked up cases proving and disproving the legal theories of the case based on facts. It was a lot of fun. Shockingly, being a private investigator translates really well into my role as cybersecurity consultant because one, I have exceptional OSINT skills, but two, having to factually work up cases also helps me with risk assessments, understanding risk, and being able to understand what we have and what we don't have. So looking at things at a whole picture. So just like a case, when you're going to trial, you have to have the whole picture. When you have an incident or when you're looking at risks, you kind of have to have the whole picture as well. So a lot of the soft skills, my research, my writing, interviewing witnesses really helps me be a great virtual chief information security officer and an advocate for my clients. I do have a bunch of initials after my name. I don't really think they're that much of a big deal. What's a bigger deal is I'm very excited. I just climbed Kilimanjaro in July. I'm very proud of that accomplishment. Yes, a pat on my back. I love adventures. So man, if you're gonna say, hey Gina, you wanna jump off that bridge? Most likely I would probably do it. So with companies, I may be risk averse. With me, I love adventure. Right now, I'm really into boxing. So if any of you guys are out there that are at like title boxing or doing any type of boxing classes, I'm all about that. I am in grad school. I'm getting my master's in cybersecurity. Right now, I'm trying to find a topic. So I'm always brainstorming on that. Likely it'll be on incident response. I'm on 4 nonprofit boards. So yes, that's school, that is work. That is for nonprofits. So my call to action to you is to get involved. Network, network, network. It's really important, guys. The reason why is, you know, you're here, so that's great. I think that there's like 1 billion of you. Let me look. I think there's over 100 of you, 500 of you, at least in the chat. So it's really important to get to know the people that are at these different conferences, get involved in your local community, as well as different local organizations. The reason why I say that is because a lot of times these are the people that can help you either one, get your entry into cybersecurity, find that next job, and or if with cybersecurity, things are evolving every day. I am a continuous learner. Every morning I wake up, I listen to a podcast about cybersecurity, the Stormcast. I also look at InfraGard posts and different cybersecurity news. Every day I have to learn. So with that, going to these different meetings, even if they're virtual, talking to people about emerging trends or technology helps me be better at my profession. So I really think that networking is one of those for anybody that's an entry level. For sure, do it. It's going to reward you twofold, tenfold, 100-fold, 5,000-fold, all of the above. All right. So this presentation is going to be a presentation where we are going to be doing a lot of chatting. And I know that there's a lot of you that love to not speak up, to hide behind your keyboard, maybe not. I don't think you guys can get off of mute, so I feel like it's going to be a lot of keyboarding. But everybody, there's no wrong answer. At times, everybody feels like an imposter, so that is one level set. You can be an expert in your field, but there are so many things that are emerging, and there are so many unknowns that every day I think even true experts in the field are still continuously learning. And if they say that they're not, we have to be worried about them. So I just want you to know, don't feel that any question that you say in the chat or anything that you write in the chat should be looked at in any negative light. So it's just going to be interactive. So with that said, because I said it's going to be interactive, I want you to warm up your fingers. All right. I need to see this chat lighting up. We have 769 people in attendance. So I at least need you to say, what do you think was the scariest threat in 2021? And I'm waiting. Who's going to be the first one to chime in? At least say hi to me in the chat. You gonna leave me hanging? Nobody. Nobody has a scary, no one thought any ransomwares were scary? No. There we go. Yes. Okay. Well, Hacker Halted, thank you. Facebook, Instagram going down. Yes. Yes. That potentially was scary to some. Also really exciting to others, I think. What about else? Come on, get your keyboards ready. We're going to have fun. I promise. Colonial Pipeline. Yes, that was definitely scary. It was definitely scary. What about that breach that happened in Oldsmar, Florida with the water? I thought that was very scary, where the bad actor went in and started changing the chemicals to the SCADA system. And as such, luckily, there was a person who was actually there sitting that was seeing the chemicals rise because it was a manual process and was able to shut it down. So, all right. So I see that we do have some shy people behind some of the chat. Well, hopefully we'll get you warmed up in a little bit. So we'll move on. And why are we here? So basically, we're at this point where we're at a breaking point. So there are criminal bad actors around the world that their goal is to take down organizations, period. So 10 years ago, we knew, 20 years ago, IT professionals, IS professionals, they knew what their boundaries were. Excuse me. So we knew we were going into an office building. We knew who was in there because we had this really heavy desktop. And the IT bubble where we knew where our perimeter was really easily defined and for our IT staff. They still had a very difficult job, but still we kind of knew where the assets were and where our people were at a certain time. In addition to that, Nowadays, everything is decentralized. And sometimes I think we have the same amount of staff that we did have 20 years ago for IT and IS. So we have no boundaries. So those boundaries before that we kind of had this kind of nice little universe, everything is decentralized with so much information going in and so much information going out. It is a lot harder to secure. And that is very scary because we're just on this tightrope. And so having this, everybody's about to break in terms of bandwidth, in terms of power, in terms of resources. And so how do you kind of protect yourself and your organization? And what's an easy way to do that without kind of breaking the bank? And one of them is through tabletop exercises. So that's the reason why we're here. So today our goal is to go through the different types of tabletop exercises, objectives, scenarios, people. We'll run through some exercises, and hopefully we'll have some participation on some exercises. I will throw some exercises at you guys, and I would love to have your first thought on how to solve the scenario. So before we begin, for those that are on the phone that don't know what a tabletop exercise is, a tabletop exercise is a really effective way to evaluate your organization's incident response capabilities. So you're looking at your tools, your people, your processes, and you're trying to find gaps. So if there was to be an incident that occurs, that you can have timely, prompt responses and make sure that you're remediating and isolating as fast as possible. So that is truly like the goal, is to see where the gaps are. The goal of a tabletop exercise is not to win the exercise. So it's not like, yay, everything is perfect. I mean, wouldn't that be great? So it means you're probably not utilized for your end users. But the exercise is really there to see where the gaps are and strengthen that area so that when there's an incident, it is flawless. And I was on an incident call earlier today. Yes, earlier today, a live incident call. And you know what? The client, everybody on my team, everybody was calm. Why? Because we prepared for this. And we were even joking. I was like, I'm just going to go downstairs and go get the popcorn. And my client was up, yeah, like, go do that. We've got some time. And we were able to give good reports back to C-levels, and we were able to get different departments involved, and nobody was stressed. That's the way an incident should go. But the reason why is we prepared for it. Tabletop exercises are a great way to prepare for incidents. So during the exercise, a facilitator like myself or somebody will be there to kind of help with communications. And what they do is they provide a scenario, something that's lifelike or real scenario that could happen to your organization. A lot of times the facilitator will pick a topic that maybe we already know a gap exists. So maybe we've done a risk assessment of your environment and we already know that maybe there's not encryption on a certain server, or maybe that you don't have encryption somewhere. So maybe we kind of tunnel into that area to kind of bubble up the importance of why encryption's there, or multi-factor or something. So it could be tailored to the organization. The other thing is just something that might be completely out of the ordinary and to throw everybody off. It could be a scenario that's still real world and applicable, but we've never talked about. And the facilitator there is to help guide communication, just like I am going to try to do today by getting you guys to use the keyboard in the chat feature. So a facilitator a lot of times is also a counselor. So you can't have one person continuously talk during a tabletop exercise. You really want kind of a diversity of thoughts. So we'll talk about some of those aspects in a second. So there are tons of other types of disaster recovery testing. We're not going to kind of go through those, but there's some read-through, simulation, parallel tests, fill interruption tests. And those are all very important for compliance reasons, you know, especially full interruption tests or parallel tests are, you know, a lot of times needed from a compliance standpoint. Simulations and games are just fun and should be done, and also is a great way for technical testing to see how from a technical standpoint, where some of your weaknesses are. Tabletop exercises are great in terms of policies, procedures, and communication, but a lot of times you need to, that's like a trust, but the verify is kind of that technical testing aspect. So your objectives of a tabletop exercise is, of course, to make sure that you have the plans, policies, procedures, and checklists, that they're kind of in place. They're brushed up, they're dusted off, and that they're in a place that your team can utilize where to go, how to do it, whose roles and responsibilities. Going on to the second one, you're clarifying roles and responsibilities. A lot of times that I see where there is kind of a pitfall, and especially in the procedures area, is that the procedures have a lot of policy statements, but it doesn't really say the who, what, when, where, why. So you really want to clarify roles. So communications is doing this, you know, the sysadmin is doing this, the CISO is doing this, the network administrator is doing this, the analyst is doing this. Having those types of run books and process flows and clarifying responsibilities is just a great way for one, people to understand where they could help from the beginning, as opposed to waiting and kind of saying like, hey, how can I help? So having some of these things ahead of time is just really, really good. This also tabletop exercise is a great team building kind of project. It helps with communications between teams as well as the entities. If you ever thought that there was potentially friction, maybe between the IT team and the IS team, or maybe the IT team and C levels, maybe you guys aren't hearing each other or something, that there's a miss. Sometimes having a tabletop exercise where the C level actually has to hear what the IT team has to do, if there was something like a ransomware, is a big aha moment. If you bring in HR to a tabletop exercise, they may understand their role in terms of cybersecurity different. So those types of things are just having that like kumbaya moment. It's kind of being in an escape room. Okay, so you can gamify tabletop exercise and really allow it to be a team building exercise. Of course, tabletop exercises, it's helping you get, you know, your timing down. It also identifies needs. So if you need maybe more people, more resources, maybe you don't have the technologies in place to even know if you can respond or not. A tabletop exercise will allow you to see where that gap is in your incident response preparedness. Also, training needs. Training needs is important. If you guys are in a large organization, probably bringing somebody in from HR or the training department is really important, because they'll see the importance of cybersecurity awareness, or why it's important to know who to respond to and what the escalation plan is, and maybe help you with security reminders or help you write newsletters and things like that. So training needs always is usually a finding on tabletop exercises. And always during a tabletop, you have a debrief at the end where you get feedback, you get recommendations for improvement, and you ask people, hey, what tabletop exercise would you like to see next? And when people actually say, hey, why don't you do this tabletop exercise next, you've hooked them. They're interested. That means that they were engaged during your tabletop exercise, and they're going to be engaged for the next one. So it's really important to continuously get a feedback loop. All right, so here's another one where I'm going to need you guys to utilize your fingers, okay? So put your keyboard. I would love to see, there is over 800 people. You know, if I can have 25 people tell me this answer, I would love it. So if you are having a tabletop exercise, who would you invite to have a seat at the table? All right, who would you bring? Are you guys all bots? I think you're all bots.
So I'm just going to interject here, Gina. We're having them, so chat has been disabled for the audience, so they can via questions.
Oh, I don't see
So
any questions.
yeah, that's how they're coming through. But instead of answering the questions, they're saying they don't have availability to chat. So just wanted to give everyone's a heads up. Unfortunately, you cannot chat, but you're more than welcome to put your answer in the questions and we can relay that to GINA. But so far we have senior management, users and systems and stakeholders, the president of the company, legal, directors from each department,
Yes.
HR, IT, privacy, CISO, and pen testers.
Well, perfect. I think that that's a really good start. So I think, one, you guys have gone through the gamut, and I'm really sorry. I didn't know about the chat feature, so my bad. I was calling y'all out. And then I thought you guys were Russian bots for a second. So, you can see where my brain is at. But you guys did some great, that was some really, really good feedback. So yes, who do you bring to the table? It could be a variety of different people. So let's kind of break that down a little bit more. I a lot of times think it has to be based on the scenario and based on the goals of an objectives. So like I said before, those pain points of an organization. So yes, having this president of the company come in, if you see that there is a risk and a liability to the company, or the company could be at risk, having him come in is amazing. Any type of stakeholder, having a C-level at the table, and being a part of the process, you get your C-level buy-in is wonderful. And also will help you with your budget in the future. I promise you that. But yes, I love all of the things. So CISO, key stakeholders, key system owners, the HR representatives, communications, legal, those are all great people to bring to the table. So this is one of those things, think outside the box. One person said in the chat, which I loved, is somebody from the end user, just an end user. And that's really smart. I have a hospital that what they do, and they bring a doctor to the tabletop exercise. The reason why they bring a doctor to the tabletop exercise is because, of course, patient health is involved. So when you have patient safety and health, you sometimes want the actual doctor, a nurse, or the practitioner who's helping with patient safety to kind of ask the questions that maybe we as cybersecurity professionals or IT professionals, we wouldn't think of. The doctor always likes to say, he's like, I like to ask the dumb questions, but usually his questions, one, they're never dumb, and two, they give people pause. A lot of times it gets people to step back. So having an end user, even if we're not talking about a hospital, or having somebody from the help desk, a lot of times those people are kind of not thought of for a tabletop exercise. But how smart is it to have somebody from who actually would be likely taking the phone call, or an end user who says, I don't even know who to call, or I don't even know what would happen when a phishing thing would come in. Those are things, think outside the box. It's a game, have fun with it. So I love it. So thank you for participating with that. So if you are the person conducting the tabletop exercise, what you would like, what I think you should do as a suggestion, especially if it's the first one in an organization, if it's like your 10th, just do a pop quiz type of thing and just be like, here, pop up scenario. But if it's the first one or the second one, bring to the tabletop exercise an agenda of what's going to happen, the rules of engagement, like, so don't speak over other people, think like you're in a kindergarten class, okay? Those types of things. A copy of the written scenarios, potentially network diagrams or maps of impacted locations, the relevant policies, procedures, or checklists, a pen, a notepad, or access to OneNote and or shared repository, and an organizational chart. Okay, so why do I think that these are important? One, people don't like to feel dumb when they go to an exit. So if you don't give them with something ahead of time, or if they don't know the answer, throw them a bone. They're less likely to participate. So by giving them some things to equip them, it does give them a sense of confidence. They'll be more likely to open up. Okay, think of yourself as a therapist in this situation. Also, a pen or a notepad or a shared kind of note-taking is really cool. And the reason why is because you have people like me who love to talk, other people that love to talk. And then there's people who do not want to talk. And those people should still have a voice. And a lot of times their voice is more important than my voice. And the reason why is because they're thinking about it, and maybe just no one's asked them of their opinion. So by having them write things down and maybe giving them to your after, or having people write stuff in the comments of the policies and procedures, their thoughts, it allows you to see where the gaps are. So think about your different audiences, how people learn differently, as well as how people communicate differently, and try to equip your tabletop exercise for those types of people. Oops, that wasn't right. All right, so I'm not going to go into this one because a lot of you on the phone are very familiar with the phases of an incident response. I have this slide more as in a tabletop exercise. You can go through all of these phases, or you can focus on different phases. So for example, preparation, that's something that you may want to have a larger seat at the table of representatives. HR, compliance, risk, legal, that could be more than just IT, because there's a lot of different people, stakeholders. Maybe for detection, analysis, and containment, eradication, and recovery, maybe you want to make those operational tabletop exercises that are, boots on the ground, you're going into the weeds, and you're really, really thinking it through. This is really where you're coming up with your playbooks, your run books, or your checklist, things like that, and your post-incident activity, and all of that. You can think about either having it all as one and or separate them in different areas. So your tabletop exercise, you can make it how you want. All right, I just like this because I think that this is just funny. Life's a breach. Okay, so I have a question. So there's a question. Okay, so we have a couple questions, and I promise to get to them. So one is about backdoors and breaches. I've got it here, and I also have my dice. So I'm a big fan, and not only if we were in person, I actually have these at my tables. I give these out. I love them. I buy them all of the time. I take them with me. This is also really helpful for tabletop exercises. If people get stuck and they just kind of want to look through things, they want to, they use their hands to, like, if they're stuck on a topic, I think backdoors and breaches is wonderful. So as you can see here, really big fan. I have probably bought $200 worth from Black Hills Security. So props to them for creating an epic game. And I do think that it is a worthwhile thing. Question, can you suggest some template sources for great TTXs? Yes and no. So yes, if you want just overall, like the Department of Homeland Security has some great ones. If you find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, I could definitely, get you in the right direction. A lot of times, I think when I'm looking for tabletop exercises, if I know that I'm working with a bunch of software developers, what I'll do is I'll type in like software development or DevOps, breaches or whatever. Like I look for real life breaches, and then I kind of custom it to that. Or I look at, let's say the OWASP, top 10, and then I find, I'll be like, okay, I want to really work on SQL injections. So I'm going to just kind of craft my own. So I'll take either real world examples, or maybe I'll just type like SQL injection tabletop exercises, cloud SaaS tabletop exercises. Sometimes the Google machine is a great machine to have. So. All right, we're about to go into a exercise. So I'm sorry, there's probably a lot of chats gonna come in or questions gonna come in. That's okay, but so I want you to warm up. Here is your scenario, all right? So we're gonna go through a tabletop exercise. I want you to just give your first opinion, and if the moderator can just give me a couple of the stuff that comes in, not like all of them, but some of them. But here's the scenario. So Joe, your network administrator, man, he is burnout. He is ready for a vacation. His bags are packed. He's ready to go. He is tasked with deploying a critical patch. In order to make his flight, Joe quickly builds an installation file for that patch. He deploys it and he leaves for the airplane. Sue, the on-call service technician, starts receiving calls that nobody can log in. It turns out that no testing was done on that recently installed critical patch. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so this is a typical tabletop scenario. What are some of your first thoughts on this? Moderator, do you have something for me?
Nothing yet. We have some.
Nothing yet.
Nothing
Okay.
yet.
We've got some sleepers. Okay, there wasn't enough coffee in the morning.
Was there an approval process for that deployment of that patch?
Oh, wonderful question. That's a good question.
Rollback. The
Love it.
patch
Roll
should
back,
be
very
tested
important.
thoroughly before deploying.
Perfect.
No
Great
staging
question.
or development environment testing, no test group, etc. Fire Joe.
Poor Joe.
Never patch on a Friday. Rollback capabilities, hopefully. More Fire Joe. Sorry, Joe. Poor planning. Fallback, rollback. Restore the last good backup.
Okay, give me 3 more.
Okay, where is your test environment? Restore the system. And Joe should have installed on a sandbox first to see what would happen.
Okay, guys, those are great. Wow, wow, wow. I love them all. So let me kind of go through some of these things. One, fire Joe. He's burnt out. Joe is me. Joe is you. Joe is everybody likely on this phone. As you may know, we have a lack of resources. So poor Joe. I mean, it's been COVID. He's burnt out. Like, poor thing. Here's the main question. Was it even Joe's patch? Nobody asked that. We don't even know if it was Joe's patch. We're assuming it's Joe's patch. That's what's really unique about a tabletop exercise, is that when you have a scenario, sometimes it is keep it simple, stupid, and you go to what's the most logical, but you also have to think of the other things that are not, that are outside the box. Maybe it wasn't Joe's patch. So who's looking at system logs? Who's looking at other things to see that if it wasn't like an advanced persistent threat coming in or something else? Likely it's Joe's patch, but you know. Also, Sue, maybe does she have the capability to fix this patch? Those types of things. Here's some questions. So for me, it's always, you know, when Sue's getting the phone call, what is the data and systems that are impacted? When you think of a tabletop exercise, if you can take anything away today, even from an incident, the number one thing when an incident comes in or a tabletop exercise is happening, the first question you should always ask is, what is the data? The data is your organization's lifeline. And if it's critical data, it might spark different escalation paths. If it's something that's like, public data that, is maybe marketing stuff, maybe that's not, confidential data. If it is your research data, that might be different. If it's data that's like EPHI, that can trigger different compliance thing. PII, that can trigger different compliance things and responsibilities. So always when you're thinking about an incident, the number one question is, what are the systems that are impacted? Was it even the change? Like, was it even Joe's fault? Mine is like, poor Joe, like, why doesn't Joe have more of a staff? Oh, I felt bad for Joe. If it said your organization have a formal change control policy, did Joe violate that? Maybe there's not even a form change policy. Who knows? A lot of organizations don't have that in place. Does your on-call technician have the expertise to handle the situation? If not, who's the escalation path? Is Joe your single point of failure? If so, that's just showing that you're missing resources. So showing your C levels that you need to add resources. That's why these exercises are so important. So, who's trained, who has the ability to do potentially rollbacks, what's the communication plan, and does your organization have a disciplinary policy if it's in place? But again, also, was it even the change? You should also have other kind of competing, themes going on, thinking about ways to, if it's not this, then it may be that. So what are your logs? What other things you're doing? So hopefully you kind of liked that game. We're going to do one more. Hopefully this one's an easy one, but we can get into the weeds pretty quick. So malware infection. An employee in your organization found a USB on the ground. Yes. On the ground, that USB was infected with malware. Stranger danger. When the employee put the USB into the company machine, it infected the organization system with an unknown malware. All right, put in the questions, some of your thoughts on this one, and I'm going to look for questions.
I did like one comment. It was Sue. She hates Joe.
Oh, Sue, could be an insider threat. That was an alternative comparison. I'll take it.
Was their endpoint security implemented?
Like that. I love
DLP in place. Should never trust an unknown USB. That one is fire the employee. Never ever patch on a Friday. Why wasn't a USB storage disabled on the OS? Proper security awareness training. Isolate machine, restore from backup, user training. Fire that employee for being that dumb guy, or see if he was in on the plan to attack the company, as no one should be that stupid anymore. Segmentation, network segmentation.
Love my techies, yes.
Was there any end user training for users?
Love it.
USB policy. It's that part of the policy to plug in found USB.
That's perfect.
A lot of segmentation.
Oh, if you wanted to finish that last one for me.
Is there an IPS, IDS?
Love it. So these are all great. These USB ones is really good for C levels to really technical crowds. Okay, so this is a really good one for when you have everybody kind of at the table. So I was listening to a podcast. I think it's called the Cyber Podcast. It was a couple weeks back, and it was regarding multi-factor authentication. And it was like, why are people not, adapting it? If we say that 98% of, if multi-factor changes 98% of, breaches from occurring, like, why is it not everybody utilizing it? And the presenter actually made a really good point. The end users don't really know. They're not true. They don't really understand the why. So we sometimes take for granted how we all know this. If we got this at a convention, we would be like, we'd laugh the vendor, off the stage, right? But end users don't know it, okay? And we take this for granted. For years, we've known of the rubber ducky scams and things like that. We know of multi-factor. We know that, we know things. The problem are the way that we're translating the why messaging around the end user. If the end user doesn't understand the why, they're not going to have a buy-in. So yes, here for this, if your organization doesn't have a GPO that blocks, USBs from entering your system without some type of encryption and an exception policy, and a very strict one, then your organization's C-level, this is a huge threat that comes in because you just don't know. A lot of organizations like higher education, maybe biotech, and research organizations, they have a hard time getting rid of these things. So having tabletop exercises on USB infections and what it means to the organization is really important. The understanding and some of the questions that came on regarding, cybersecurity awareness, training, things like that is huge. I think that's a really important lesson. People just don't understand why, if they find a device, like probably I would say 99% of the policies that I read, they say removable media is not allowed. That's in their policy. It doesn't say removable media is not allowed. This includes this, and this, like a USB. And if you see a USB stick on the ground, please bring it to the IT department for further investigation, or please bring it to reception and for lost and found or something like that. It doesn't direct them to the next step. And even saying a step further, please bring it because that USB could have malware. Explain your why. I think why messaging is something that we just take for granted because we hear about it in the news. We're so inundated. We're like, oh my gosh, like how is not everybody paying attention to these breaches that are happening? Well, guess what? They're not, because they are paying attention to things that are on Facebook and media that is not cyber related. So we have to kind of reinforce why messaging back to why the end user thinks it's important. So a lot of times when I'm doing cybersecurity awareness training, even though it's about the organization, I relate it back to their home environment or their children or their elderly parents. And I try to tell them and equip them to then go train their family. And when they start to disseminate that information to train their family members and things like that, it helps the organization become more secure. So, but yes, if there's a malware infection, who do you have to notify in the organization? So you're thinking like the SOC SIM, what logs are you looking at? What is that there? Who is those people? What type of malware is it? What's that process for identifying? I loved the one regarding containment and isolation. So whoever said that, great job. Like, yeah, like can we, is there appropriate segmentation? Can we isolate the spread? Is it going to spread? Can we is there endpoint protection on there? So that's really important. Is there other devices that can prevent similar threats? Does somebody need to go walk around the office looking for USBs, right? How do you prevent this from occurring again? GPO, right? Exception policies, having encryption. Maybe it's only read-only, something. Things like that. Training policies and procedures. That's why I was saying having a training person, having a seat at the table is awesome. And of course, the number one question, I did put it, I'm yelling at you all, what type of data was affected when the malware came in? So you always have to figure that because it does trigger a lot of things pertaining to your incident response. There was a question on here pertaining to when should you activate the DR plan as part of the incident response? And so that's a really good question. It really just kind of depends on what's in your disaster recovery. So, is it pertaining to an environmental threat do you have? Is it a hurricane? Is it a flooding? Right now, COVID was a huge DR business continuity, plan that kind of everybody went into effect. A lot of organizations, you need to have a threshold on when certain plans are activated. So you need to have that person. That's why that roles and responsibilities is really important. The person, while everybody does know what they can start doing, pulling logs, finding machines, things like that, there also needs to be that person who will activate other plans and activate other communication plans and other plans accordingly, depending on the severity of the incident. So scenarios, ransomware. I wouldn't start off with ransomware, but definitely a ransomware scenario is huge. If you're living in New York and you're part of NYDFS, that kind of regulations, they have their own cybersecurity kind of regulation right now. They are requiring in your incident response plan that you have talked about and addressed ransomware. So make sure if you're living or you're having people with anything financial or insurance, that you're doing your incident response on ransomware. Phishing is a great tabletop exercise. And the reason why I say this is because you can have a brown paper lunch, okay? Brown paper lunch, and you just have a pizza party. And what you do is you tell everybody like, hey guys, what would you do if you thought a phishing email came in? This is to the end users. And some people would be like, I would delete it. I would forward it on. I would, you know, tell my coworker, come over here and look at this. And you can say, all of that's great. And yes, you could do that. And yes, that's appropriate. Hey, no, Joe, don't do that. Sue, are you really the insider? Like you can start, you know, figuring out questions, and you can tell people what, you can reinforce what your phishing policy is, what your phishing processes are, who to email, how to report, and maybe you're not forwarding the email. Maybe it's going to a sandbox, something like that. Maybe the IT person is coming to that person's desk, or maybe the person is, they're calling IT and then IT is figuring out the way on how to analyze that potential phishing attack. Users need to understand the processes. So just having kind of a pizza party and asking users what to do and having, you know, making it fun, bring Swedish fish, those little fish to the party is also kind of fun, especially during the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. But here's some other ones. I really think O365 compromise is a big one right now. But you know, it could be anything from a stolen device to an internet outage to you know, hurricanes that turn into flooding, that turn into, you know, our backups, right? So really anything can become a scenario. Just be creative with it. Your phases of an exercise is you have your scenario, you have your discussion, and then you have these like kind of injection points, which I'll have in a second. Then you have again a discussion, and then you do a debrief. So types of interjections would be like, breaking news tells us that it was an advanced persistent threat that I don't know, is taking down all, you know, 12 different hospitals in the United States, and say you were a hospital, or your CISO is on the plane. So like Joe was on the plane. That's a good injection. Like you just get rid of the person who's talking the most. Your internet just went down. SharePoint's down. The FBI just showed up. You can have tons of injections. Also, the backdoors and breaches has some injections for you. This is a way that if you get stuck, if the facilitator gets people get stuck on one area and you need them to pivot to other areas to discuss different areas of the incident response plan, that is the great way, is an injection. It's kind of a way to kind of, you know, move them to a different stage. Then you have your debrief. So your debrief is when you just talk to your users that were at the tabletop and say, hey guys, you know, what are some of the lessons that we learned? You know, how can we make improvements? And then you, as the facilitator, you document that, because you know, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. But here you put together a memo that has what the scenario was, has, you know, notable practices, because there's going to be notable practices. Make sure you praise the different areas of the organization when they did well. You just can't always focus on the negative. Cybersecurity can be fun. And then of course, put an area for room and improvement. When you're doing the debrief, a lot of times what the facilitator finds as gaps, there might be more gaps that others think. So that's why the debrief is important, because maybe Sue, who didn't talk this entire tabletop exercise, maybe she has something on a note paper, or comes to you afterwards saying, hey, I think that this might be a gap. I think one of the biggest, you know, lessons to learn is, if you don't have a tabletop exercise in your organization, bring a chair. You know, bring a seat to the table, create your chair, have fun with it, you know, make it a game. I think it's really important to think that way. I know that we are running out of time, and I'm sorry, I did have 2 more slides, but if you guys want to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter, you know, please do so. And I really do thank you guys all for your time. I do have, if you guys have questions and can stay, I'm welcome to do that. If there's another session you have to go to, I absolutely understand that as well. So I'm going to go to the panel of questions now, if that's all right.
Not a problem, Gina. You are actually the last session before lunch. So if people do want to stay on, we don't have our next session until 12:50. So, you know, of course we want to allow a break, but definitely answer some questions. Those questions are coming in.
Okay, so one of the things, so the question, and it's one of the slides I kind of skipped because I knew I was just like right at time, which is a great question. It's for the operational security folks versus the executive folks. I do not know where I got this slide, so I cannot source like credit, I'm sorry, but it's to probably a great organization, and there are two main different tabletop exercises. So when we think about tabletop exercises, we think about operational and technical, and then we think about executive. So operational is really kind of that when we think about the incident response phases, that detection and response and remediation, all of that would kind of be under tabletop operational. So for that, a lot of those sessions that I do would be about 3 hours in length. Sometimes we'll pull up logs, we'll look at different things, but really it's kind of how do you really analyze what's coming in, what different sources do you go to get the information, because of course, when you're thinking operational tabletop exercises, you wanna have data, data-driven decisions, and those decisions cannot be made unless you're equipped with the proper resources. So making sure that you have that in place is really, really important. The executive tabletop, that's one where you're really thinking about what type of risks and liabilities exist. These scenarios can only be an hour. And a lot of times they'll go over just because the executives actually have more fun than they thought that they were going to have fun, because it is a game. So a lot of mine, they may be an hour. A lot of times the executives are like, can you come back and do another one? Because they learn a lot of stuff. But most of the time when you schedule a executive one, you need to only schedule it for an hour. If it goes over, that means you have them hook, line, and sinker into your cybersecurity program. And that's really when you're having to think about communication plan, breach notification, what type of communication that needs to be, setting up different war rooms, like kind of the overall buy-in from executives. So hopefully that kind of helped you there. What cybersecurity podcast do I find most useful? Oh, I love the Darknet Diaries. I don't know if that's the most useful or if that's the one that I just find them like the most fun for me to like listen to. I would say Stormcast every day, the SAM Stormcast. It's 5 to 10 minutes. And that just gives me the jolt I need to know what's happening in the world of cybersecurity for my clients that day. So I do think that that's probably the most useful for me. But I would say the most interesting would be probably Darknet Diaries. All right, let's see here. Are you using any good services you recommend for polling to allow some? I don't know if I necessarily understand the question, but are you using any good services you'd recommend for polling to allow some anonymity, I can't even supposed to say that word, while conducting your tabletop exercise? I've never done it that way in terms of like having anonymous feedback. I'll have to think that through. If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, we can totally brainstorm on that. I think that that's probably a good way if you do, notepad and paper. That sound, when you say that you want things that are anonymous, it sounds like to me definitely a tabletop exercise is needed to build bridges amongst team members. What is one of the biggest areas of cyber concern or useful technologies coming up in the near future? Oh, I love that question. Okay, so in terms of my organizations, they're either all in the cloud or they're half in the cloud. So I think really it's when we're thinking about what architecture of the future looks like, and we look at the latest executive order from the White House, I think that came over in June. They're really looking at zero trust architecture from a national security, level, national level. So I believe, if you look at that, kind of executive order, you're going to see it broken down into a lot of different things. And that executive order was really pretty powerful. And the reason why is because we've had executive orders on cybersecurity in the past. However, this one kind of had some teeth to it. It directed people to, directed organizations to do certain items by certain dates and report back. So it was the first one that kind of had that who, what, when, where, why. So when you look at that, it looks like federal organizations, they're looking, one, of course, to being in the cloud. Two, they want them to look at zero trust architecture. Three, supply chain. And number four, they want to make sure there is secure coding. So I think that that's really important. My organizations that I'm working with now, really developing a secure software development lifecycle program and processes is huge. So having more tabletop exercises that are devoted to your dev teams are just very important, especially when you're thinking about agile and how that works. And it needs to be proactive as opposed to reactive. When you're thinking about software, trying to retrofit into security, it's like a 30 times more cost than incorporating security into the beginning. So that's really important. In terms of technologies, if I think bare minimum, we definitely need endpoint agents on every device. So that's the biggest help, and of course multi-factor, but having an endpoint agent on every device is very useful for when, if you are in an incident, having your SOC team or your security operations center, allowing them to kind of see how the malware or bad actors traversing the network and isolating and or stopping at the endpoint so it doesn't affect the rest of the network. Can a virus be contained on and studied after an attack? Yeah, a lot of times you can, there are so many amazing threat intelligence tools in their communities of interest. A lot of times when we're dealing with an attack, we are already pulling up the signature of the virus on different virus platforms. And there's already usually history about them. 0 days, it's a little bit different. It's harder. That's stuff that can be developed will be developed in the future. But in terms of a virus, if it's been around even for a couple of days to a couple of months, usually on the different virus feeds, you can research it and it'll say like when it first appeared, who they think the bad actor is, what IPs should be shut down, and kind of it helps you with remediations and stuff. Things like Recorded Future is good for that, as well as there's tons of open source threat feeds and communities of interest that can help. Last question, do you recommend a tabletop exercise for security operations centers? Absolutely, I love that. Yeah, and that's fun. For security operations centers, I think it's a team building. This is a great team building experience. And really, it will help senior analysts and maybe so if you think about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 members of your team, having like the tier 3 help tier 1s, understand how to work the different tools and technologies that are in the SOC really just kind of level sets and really improves the entire capability of the Security Operations Center. So walking through a tabletop exercise and saying, hey, this is what I would do, what would you guys do? And kind of seeing if the same is true. And if it's not, then maybe that's a training deficiency. Maybe you bring in your managed service provider, or maybe you get some professional services to train up on those tools. But it'll help you really. It's kind of like your cell phone, where you're only maybe using 25% of it when you can really be using 100% of it to kind of protect yourself against bad actors. So again, guys, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. It has been a true honor. Happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Happy conference day. I hope you have a great time. And I know there's some wonderful sessions out there, and I look forward to seeing you guys hopefully in person really soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Gina. What a great talk. What great energy. Just loved everything about it. Looking forward to having you join us in 2022 in person. Thank you so much for your time.